What's exciting you right now in your practice, in the market, or just life in general?
Shifting from a traditional way of servicing client, we lawyers clock in, bill the client the hourly rate, and this is the traditional model at the moment. But we're looking at a new model to shift to a value-driven model, in my view.
Actually separates a good lawyer from a great one.
It is a given to have good legal skills and to get things right. That's the expectation. That's why the client pay the hourly rate. But really differentiate between good and great lawyers are whether the advice actually helping the client.
Welcome, Lizzie.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the podcast today. So Lizzie, you've built a career across China, the US, and Australia. Can you walk us through the journey and how each place has shaped the way you think as a lawyer?
Right. So I was born and raised in China, and before high school, I only lived in China. But it's quite interesting that I was actually majoring in physics back then, and law was never something I was thinking about before uni. However, back then there were not many computers in the workplace, and my mom's excuse to me to go to law school is it's good for your skin because you're not facing computer screens every day. But look at where we are now. So yeah, I went to law school in China, mainly in Fudan University. So it is one of the sort of best university in China. And during the law school time, I went into a law firm for internship called King & Wood Mallisons. Back then it was King & Wood. At the time I joined, it merged with Mallisons. So yeah, I got exposure to a little bit of Australian colleagues, with interesting accents and everything, right? And then I was thinking at the time, because I've been born and raised in China, that I have quite a lot of foreign friends in Shanghai. So I was thinking maybe it's going to be fun studying overseas. So I applied for a few law schools and got into Cornell Law School for a master's degree. So I went there. It was my first time living in the States, and it's quite exciting. I tried to sort of play hard, work hard type of lifestyle. I even move my classes in 3 days so that I can have 4 days left to drive to Manhattan and have fun. So back then I was thinking, maybe I'll go back to China and work. And I actually indeed went back to China and Shanghai and work again. However, the working hours is not really what I like to be. And also with the US qualification and degree, I think I can explore more. So I think I consider myself quite lucky because at the time when I was applying overseas job, Australian-China relationship has been really good. Yeah. And basically quite a lot of people want to come to Australia, invest in Australia, especially Mandarin speaking, Chinese speaking investors as well. So for me, the job opportunity opened up in Baker McKenzie in Sydney. I still remember it was a day with pouring rain, and I was 30 minutes late, and I had to call up not the brand group back then, but I have to call up the reception at Baker and say, I'm terribly sorry, but here, I don't know about the weather over there, but here is just pouring rain, so I have to be late. So I interview with, I would say I was very lucky to have a partner called Bill Fuggle. He's the senior partner in Baker's office, and he only took about 15 minutes of interview to give me a job.
Wow.
Mostly we were talking about, do I play basketball? Because
really?
at the time, they would like to hire someone who can play basketball in the KGV tournament with the corporate competition. So I came to Australia for the first time, and I was talking to my colleagues in China about going to Australia. And they were like, do you know where exactly is Sydney? So I actually have never been to Sydney or Australia at all when I accepted a job offer.
Wow.
And I had zero friend, zero family, and just by myself and work. So basically I came to Australia about 12 years ago. That was the time. I still remember. I think it was 3rd of October 2014. So I arrived, I went to Opera House, took a photo. I still have that photo with me. The person who picked me up was my pen pal from Mallesons.
Wow.
So he was like my only friend I know in Australia. He picked me up from the airport and he's like, yeah, here you go. This is Opera House. Looks the same as the, internet. And then I took a photo and I started working immediately the next day. So in terms of US experience, I did mention the US bit. I mentioned to you that I actually took a career, sort of like career break, and then lived in Las Vegas for about 8 months at the time, because I was preparing for my I was thinking about going to JD program in West Coast, but eventually I went back to China to do my KWM job. At the time, it's just after GFC, so a lot of Californian people can't afford their houses, so they came to Vegas too. Yeah, so we basically just set up the firm and sell houses and also rent out fancy golf course villas for people, and also enjoy the off-strip life.
Yeah, there's a life in Vegas outside of the strip,
So yeah,
right?
I think so put all together, it's really international background of me. I'm not scared of going anywhere that's new, basically, and going into any field. I joined Baker's to help with cross-border M&A and IPOs for overseas companies. But to be honest, I have never been to Australia. Like, I haven't really practiced in Australia.
Yeah.
So I actually transferred my US license in Australia after I arrived. And it's quite different in terms of legal working environment in China and US and Australia, especially China and Australia. Chinese has civil law system, back then we're joking around. We're the first generation of lawyer that actually trained by a lawyer, because there was no real sort of like legal system in China back then. Especially like whenever you need to know something like how the lawyers implement, you have to phone up the government and say, hey, what do you think this will do? Like, does it work? Because not many people have done. So we helped like Alibaba, for example, set up Alipay. Back then was nothing like that. And we set up like a gold exchange in Shanghai. So back then was like, everything is really new. So we actually have to be very creative at the time. But as compared to Australia, everything is really established.
Yeah.
And there's a practice. And to me, it's actually relatively easier, because you do have a pattern you can follow, and you can learn from, and you can ask, like my Chinese experience encouraged me to actually always talk to ASIC and ASX and check in with them, which is a good thing. So yeah, that is, here I am at the moment.
That's
Do you want me
awesome.
to talk more about
Yeah, I think it's
is it too long?
no, I think when you look at those decisions you make in your life, like looking at, you're going to move to Sydney, you've never been there before. It's a risk, right? Because you're like, yes, the job is great and the firm is great and I want to be a lawyer, but ultimately you don't know what to expect.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think those decisions shape you as a person, because when you are thrown in the deep end, if you will, you kind of have to just put yourself out there and not stay in your comfort zone. And that doesn't not just make you a better lawyer, but it also develops you as a person, which I think, taking that jump when you don't really know what to expect.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot to learn from that, from anyone who's starting out their career.
Yeah, exactly. I think I recently heard a saying that if you really want something, you just go for it.
Yeah.
If you don't go for it, you'll never get it. But if you actually go for it, you will get it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true after, those experiences, because I just feel like the brave person who can go for it can get whatever they want. Like,
I agree.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned you're now at Baker McKenzie, one of the most globally integrated firms in the market, with a strong Hong Kong presence. What drew you to that platform, and how does the firm's reach change the work that you do?
That's a good question. Reputation is one thing, because Baker McKenzie, even before I came to Australia, I know this name very, very well, because we do have a very big presence all over the world. I would say like one of the largest, most covered law firm in terms of jurisdictions in the world. So I think it will be, at the time when I picked Baker's, I have no doubt that all the people there will be of very good quality, and also the reason I continued to, so I did mention that I was at Baker's before, and I went to Freehills and I went back to Baker's. the reason I actually rejoined the Bakers and picked this platform again is just very suitable for my background. Multicultural, and you'll be talking to various offices, in 24 hours. And we actually work very closely with our Asian offices as well, like for some of my deals. So as if we were the same team. So this type of interaction and the cooperation is not all the firms. Like at least I worked for big law firms, and I think Baker's has the best of that. And also the culture. In legal industry, it's already very tough, I would say. Like you will see like tough figures, and you have to be sort of like, especially people like myself, like, female, Asian. So you have to be really toughen up in order to do certain things as a lawyer, especially as a partner. However, I think the Baker's culture is very inclusive in terms of they're promoting multicultural, they're promoting gender equality, and we are very conscious of that as well. Whenever we do make a decision, we say, well, how about diversity? How about, whether everybody has a fair go, whether everybody has a fair chance? So I think that culture basically build if you actually join me for my work for a day, you will feel like everybody's kind of like equal. I myself sit open plan with my associate, with my graduate. So I almost being, the same as them, like the team member. Not like the traditional law firm environment. You would go to a law office and you see the senior partner occupying the corner office and not available. And then someone needs to be like, kind of like have a lot of courage to knock on the door and talk to them. I think the culture has changed nowadays in the newer generation, especially with newer generation partners as well. Yeah,
it's great to see, and it says a lot about the firm when a candidate or a lawyer goes and joins another firm and then goes back to the firm. You see it all the time when someone might make a move overseas and then come back to that firm in Australia. And I do think that says a lot about the culture of the firm, and it says a lot about you've tried something, you've gone out, you got a different experience, and you're going to go back because of how well the culture is, or how well the team is set up, or how the work was. And it really does say a lot about, we encourage candidates who are interviewing at firms is to always look at and see if they're we call boomerang candidates, where have they come back, because there's a reason why. And it says a lot about the firm when you do have those types of associates and partners.
And I'm not the only one. I think in my year, we have a few of those as well, like the partners and coming back as well. I usually joke around people who resign and say, see you later, you'll be back. I'm sure when you look around. So it's a good culture. Yeah. So
you advise on both M&A and capital markets. How do those two practices differ in terms of pace, pressure, and the type of thinking required?
All right. Very different.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting way of structure this as well, because in Australia, so if I were a law partner in our Hong Kong office, it's usually either or, because for bigger market, you basically have only capacity to do certain things, like for example, only capital markets or only M&A. However, in Australia, because the market is not the huge market like London, Hong Kong, New York, you actually do have opportunity, which I like, to practice both sides, like an M&A and IPO. And it's usually, depending on the market condition, usually when IPOs are actually very active, and you will sometimes have less M&A, and vice versa. In terms of how things are structured, for both types of deals, IPO is more like a prescribed process, especially in Australia. Like if you want to get listed on a stock exchange, you usually have a roadmap already set for the process. So does require less of, especially when the process is kicked off, does require less of creative structuring and everything. So there's some certain rules already set for the deal. The creative thinking usually happened prior to the IPO kicks off, structuring probably set already. And M&A, on the other hand, especially private M&A, you have various ways and to structure it. You can do SSL, share sale, or hybrid, and you can do minority, just more variation to it. But at the end of the day, they're all sort of like, commercial deals. I think the client's expectation and the team's dedication is similar. The pace is very demanding, especially for big ones with tight timelines. However, I do feel I enjoy different aspects. For IPO, for example, I enjoy talking to the founders, understand their success story, where they get from zero to hero, and it's interesting bit. And we'd like to, previously when we have international IPOs, we actually go overseas to visit the site, like we actually see the factory, and talk to the founders and their employees, and it's kind of like almost like understanding someone's life. M&A on the other hand is more like on paper, like when you do due diligence, you're sort of just looking at the data rooms, and it's a little bit different in there. So yeah, so I like both.
Almost a more human side to the IPO. Yeah, but it's great to have that mix, right? And
it is, yeah.
I think a career in Australia at a top tier firm or an international firm can give you that, as opposed to, as you pointed out, in Hong Kong or London or in New York, it's a lot more deal intense. Yeah. So with that, you don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, I do have some associate who relocated from Hong Kong to Australia in my team, or other teams in our firm, saying to me that they're doing much more variety of work in Australia as compared to you almost like how to say, like factory worker, and you only do one thing every day, day in, day out. But as compared to today you're doing M&A, today you're doing public takeover, today you're doing IPO, so it's quite different. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And talking about those transactions then, so you've worked on some really, really big transactions by Australian standards. A 1.5 billion capital raising, 540 million acquisition. Without giving anything away, what does it actually feel like to be in the middle of something of that size?
Well, those deals are actually not the largest as compared to the world standard.
Yeah, exactly.
But from Australian standards is big. I don't really think about the size of the deal that much when I provide services to my client. I think deal size means there are more people working on it, like more eyes on it, and then I just need to perform the highest standard of my legal skills and everything. But I don't think you should judge how you perform or provide legal service based on size of the client and size of the deal. To me, they're all my clients, and I need to provide the most commercial deal, most commercial advice to them. I do have some interesting experience with largest. I won't mention that, but it was like largest IPO of last year. I had the opportunity working on the deal. We did have like say 60 attendees on the Saturday or Sunday for a meeting in order to finish the deal in say 14 days instead of the usual like 3 months type of period. So you do have the pressure, and then a lot of time you have to really jump on a call really late at night, or during weekend when your kids go to sports, and it's like, I'm sorry, I have to like do this call on the side of the soccer court. And so it's really demanding, and the client, especially a large client, expect you to be available 24/7. Even though for Australian standard, people say about Australian lawyers like they never they're not the fastest. But for me, I think because my background and my working history, I tend to be available like 24/7 for my clients. My husband was not very happy about. My kids are not very happy about, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
It's a lifestyle.
It is,
and I think you can see and you can tell that you really love what you do. So that helps. So that it doesn't feel like a job when you are sitting with a client. And to your point, when you visited the factory and you understand them, and then they ask you for something, you feel like you're involved and this is impacting somebody's life. So it does make the job a bit easier. So you've helped a number of Chinese founded businesses list on the ASX. Taking a company from one market and introducing it to a completely different investor base. What's the human side of that process?
Oh, that's a very interesting process. Sometimes can be difficult.
Yeah.
But we're here to break the barrier and make people think we are the same as them, I think. Especially, it's not one way. It's actually both ways, because a lot of founders from a different culture background would not understand why they need to do certain things. For example, once you're listed, your company is no longer yours. Like your company, you have to be responsible for all the minority shareholders or people who invest in your company. You cannot just make the decision by yourself without consulting with other, directors. But on the other hand, there's a level of trust, at the beginning might not be there because, some of the misunderstanding of, the cultural background of people from other country, or they might not be doing the right thing, or the presumption was like they're not doing the right thing, so we need to make them do, but that's not correct. I think people need to have basic trust, especially in business with each other. And I myself can help to bridge this gap because the language, because I'm a native speaker of Mandarin and English is actually my second language, so I can actually, and from a cultural perspective, I can present in a way that's not too direct, because I think the Western way of doing things is sometimes a bit direct, and if something is not good, you just basically spell out and people might not take it in a good way. But I think, through some explanation and why they're doing that, and it will help them understand each other. So it's not really easy, and still not easy at the moment. I would say Chinese company listing in anywhere in the world face challenges, not internally from China as well as from overseas exchanges as well. But what we can do is to identify the good ones and, so present that to the Western society,
Yeah, and it's awesome to see that value you can offer them, because you kind of walk that walk, and you show that you have their back, and
That's
you do
right.
truly understand them. And I think that's so important when you're trying to get a deal across the line, to say,
That's right.
I understand you, understand where you're at. I'm here to be your partner.
Yeah, and help them to, because we understand what they're facing
Yeah.
in China as well. Like, 'cause sometimes it's state-owned enterprise. They have different procedures and then difficulties internally, especially certain things is not truly commercial. Like, it's not really fully commercial environment, but we understand what they're facing over there. So then trying to help them with that as well, yeah.
And so looking at those cross-border deals, they can look seamless from the outside, but where do the real complexities tend to emerge behind the scenes?
Yes, seamless from the from outside to the client. We try to make everything looks very seamless to the client. However, it's sometimes it's really difficult dealing with different jurisdictions, especially with certain governments not being very responsive, or certain local people not truly understand the urgency, and they might think turnaround time of 2 days is like a miracle to them, but for us we need that in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, how to bridge that gap, and at the same time, especially client is asking us to coordinate everything at the time, so the client was thinking it's our problem if we don't get a turnaround time in place. I think we recently faced a few of those in acquisition transactions in Southeast Asia and North Asia as well. And then sometimes we have to sort of take the responsibility, like have to apologize to the client, say sorry, but we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just because we have to manage that, and then we just chase and chase. I think those people hate us by now, but it is just have to manage the expectation and take on a lot of responsibility at the same time, hoping the client would not we still use us because we're the best in the industry, but still might not be what exactly they wanted, and how to make client feel comfortable. I think it's not just legal, I would say. It's also calm them down, they'll be okay, something like that. Yeah.
And you're fully bilingual, and you've lived across 3 jurisdictions. How do language and cultural understanding actually shape the way you advise on deals?
I think I touched a little bit on that previously. I feel like two different persons when I speak both languages. I think you basically have different sort of persona. I think when you are in different culture, because I can't talk to you like if I can, but you don't feel like I'm an Australian law firm partner if I talk to you in the way that I speak Chinese to my high net worth client, for example. So it's actually good for me, and I'm used to it because I've been doing this for a long time. but it's very helpful to clients and shaping myself to be some one of the kind of like a unique legal practitioners in Australia. So our team at the moment have we're trying to hire people who can do that as well, because people don't want to think that you're actually a China desk or Chinese lawyer. They want to think you're Australian lawyer, but you are also a Chinese lawyer. So you can be both. So either way, you can't be sort of going one way, not the other. So I think that raises your competitiveness in this industry as well. And then same for our team. We now have like 2 partners, like myself and another partner, Raymond. We're similar, but he grew up in Australia and I grew up in China. So a little bit different, but it's kind of similar. And we also have a few associate, including senior associate, who can do that. So it's quite interesting position, not interesting, but it's quite a competitive position for us in Australian market at the moment.
Yeah, it's great. And I think working at a firm like Baker's can give you that and can give you that opportunity to almost be this double two-sided lawyer. It's funny you say that. My wife is Swedish and she just speaks Swedish to my kids, and her mum is Swedish, and it's like her superpower. And she always laughs about that. She is this personality to the kids, and I have to go out and take lessons. But it can be your superpower because, you know, from a cultural side of things, even from the way you talk and the way your mannerisms are, it is different. It's not just speaking the language. It's about, you know, your behaviors, the way your hand movements. It's just even the slang. And I think, you know, seeing Danielle, my wife in Sweden, even her parents, she's different how she acts in Australia. It's fascinating to watch. So with shifting geopolitics and tightening foreign investment rules, how has that changed the way you structure deals and advise clients on risk?
That's a very timely topic. Geopolitical relationship is actually driving a lot of cross-border, like especially from Greater China and Asian investors or foreign investors in general into Australia. And as you know, the current war, and we don't know what's happening with Iran-US situation. Australians actually have been considered as one of the stable jurisdictions to invest. However, Australian government itself is building up a certain sort of protection of the national security and making sure that our homeland is safe as well. So what we do is we actually have very constant contact with the relevant regulator in like in Treasury in relation to FIRB, and we sort of know most of the deals, what's happening in this space. Basically, whenever there is approval, we will know the first-hand approval. Probably not public, but we do know like what has been approved, what has been rejected, and what's taking very, very long time. So when the first thing client come to us, at the moment, the hot area include renewable energy projects and healthcare, resources, and including some sort of critical mineral investment. When the client come to us and say, hey, I want to invest this area, and I would tell you, this one, there's no hope you're going to get approval, so don't bother. Like, don't even think about it. This one, like, you know, if you can JV with someone 50-50, you might be able to get approval, but there's limitation, there's conditions, and this one is all fine. So because we know the market very well and the landscape very, very well, so the client would get comfort from us by just talking to us, and we can also structure the deal in a way that it doesn't trigger it, but the client has its limitation. So I think that's very first step. We usually get the client, and I think because of that, we have quite a few like new clients recently as well because we our knowledge in the space.
It sounds as if you guys are a very safe pair of hands, and that's what clients are looking for, especially when in the current climate. It's just people have questions, they just want to feel like they're being heard, and also feel like if they're going to go through the transaction, that you guys have got experience and you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, that there is a highly chance of success. So looking at the Asian Australian corridor then more, you've advised on transactions across the Asia Australia corridor for years. How are capital flows evolving, and where are you seeing the most interesting opportunities right now?
Yeah, I mentioned at the moment, Australia has been quite attractive place to invest. At the same time, the Chinese economy is not as going as fast as previously. So there are actually capitals, inflows in Australia that is happening at the moment. It's really the opportunity of investing in those projects I just mentioned. That's why we got inquiries basically every day or every week in relation to whether they can invest in Australian project, either it's resource or renewables or consumer products and everything. So I think that the opportunity still lies in the investment of Australian targets by Asian investors, and they do have quite a lot of capital flows, and some of them actually withdrew probably from the US, given and Middle East maybe given the current situation, and a lot of them are actually looking to invest in the good quality projects in Australia. So I'm seeing more and more inquiries and uptake of this type of interest going forward. However, it's all depending on the government's attitude towards foreign investors, right? We will never have a problem, not never, but it's rarely have a problem with, say, investors from some countries like Singapore or like even Taiwan. It was okay for some of the projects we do, but for something related to mainland China or Hong Kong, like Macau and those places, we're facing a little bit of like restriction into a certain area. So I think demand is one thing, and also the government regulatory framework is another thing to drive the trend.
That's super interesting. And then looking at Hong Kong specifically, there's been a lot of noise about Hong Kong's role as a financial center. How do you see the Hong Kong-Australia relationship evolving over the next few years?
It's a good question. I don't know if you know that Hong Kong IPO at the moment is one of the hottest area.
Yeah, we sure
and
do.
I think Baker McKenzie I think we ranked number 2 in deal numbers. So we're doing, I think, 80 to 100 IPOs at the moment at the same time. So to us, Hong Kong is a very important place to be, but the position of Hong Kong has changed. It was no longer sort of like your independent financial area. But I know that Hong Kong government has been promoting Hong Kong as a financial center in Australia as well. And then we recently had a chat with them about that. So I think the relationship, especially from a commercial corporation investment perspective, quality Australian business do have opportunity to get listed in Hong Kong, so have access to that, the Asian-based or Greater China-based capital markets. There's a lot of money there, a lot of people investing there. So the relationship will continue to grow. I have no doubt. It just in the area with certain sensitive investment, there's still going to be restrictions, but I don't see a reason why Hong Kong, Australia will have any downturn, or I think it will grow.
Yeah, I think it's certainly an exciting time. Even just looking at the numbers of IPOs that are happening there and the strength of the market, it's super exciting. And I think the proximity of the two locations, I think, can only mean not just from a movement of people, but also businesses, and it's definitely one to watch over the next couple of years. So at the highest end of this work, the small details can have major consequences. What actually separates a good lawyer from a great one?
Oh, I do have an answer to that. So I think for all the lawyers working in big firms or like top tier firms, it is a given to have good legal skills and to get things right. That's the expectation. That's why the client pay the hourly rate for. But really differentiate between good and great lawyers are whether the advice actually helping the client. Sounds very easy and simple thing to say. For example, if you receive, like if you're a client, for example, if you receive email from a lawyer sending out all the rules and everything, and it looks very complex, and then at the end and you say, sorry, you can't do this. Like you're going to be like, why I'm paying $5,000 for this email? Like probably just, not happy. But on the other hand, same thing, if a lawyer sends you an email, just say, there are challenges, but there are different ways of, trying to overcome that. Like, even a lawyer telling you, not spending $5,000, telling you this is not doable, like I mentioned, there's no hope you can do that. So I just need to tell you that, and you don't need to spend time in paying me. I usually say to the client for certain things, please don't get me engaged to do this because you can't do this. So I'm just going to waste your money. And then if a deal is doable, a great lawyer will find a way for the client. So the client just needs to sit back, make a decision. I think the best experience, if I want a lawyer and I'm a client, I just want to say, yeah, no, yes, and then just like make decision, and then you have a solution for you, and then you just need to sign a document or provide instructions. I think that's really important because I will consider buying top tier law firm legal service as buying like Hermes bag, for example. You're supposed to be getting the best treatment and enjoy it. Like there's a process of like making clients happy. So that's basically my understanding. It might be different from others, but I think a lot of law firms, big law firms in the world can do complex deal like we can do. Like we're the same top tier, top notch lawyers. But how the client feel is make the difference. Yeah,
it's a really interesting breakdown. How do people want to be heard and people want to feel like they're being seen and make them feel special and add value.
Yeah.
I think that is a difference, and it's a really interesting breakdown because some people expect that answer to be the brightest, the smartest, the loudest, but ultimately it's about the service and the value you offer, because that's what people remember. It's how you make them feel.
That's right. And sometimes for different types of clients, some clients just like lawyers to tell them what to do, right?
Yeah.
Some clients just don't want the lawyer to tell them what to do. So I think a great lawyer can adapt to that, like in terms of what the client like,
And I think with the world moving the way it's moving with AI, being a junior lawyer right now can be quite daunting. For junior lawyers on complex transactions, it can be hard to stand out. What are the small things associates can do early on to build real trust?
Look, I'm glad that you mentioned AI. It can't be missed in any conversation now. Same for us. We do. We start an AI club actually in our team, in our group. We're trying to brainstorm what can be done to minimize the process and increase the efficiency, so bringing better value for our client. I think a junior lawyer at the moment, I think it's a challenging time. I don't want to be junior at this time if I could do it again. So now it's very different from like 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I was a junior lawyer. Back then would be do the best drafting and read the precedents and things. I think now is how to how to find a way to achieve the outcome of the client in the most efficient way is a talent of a junior lawyer at the moment. They're actually naturally more creative than some of the older generation. I consider myself as younger generation. So I think the way of creating the AI enabled tool, for example, we recently did an AI agent for reviewing certain type of documents, like that's very standard in the standard form all the time, but the client always need those. So we actually have the agent and just need to put in the document, and then it will spit out the review result, like instead of having one associate doing that in an hour. So whoever is a junior who did that together with the team will be best valued, I would say. And it's not saying that the drafting skill is no longer, it's still very important, but I think it's more important now. So if someone can identify what's good and what's bad drafting, it's no longer, it's like a calculator, right? So you no longer need to actually manually calculate something. You just need to check whether the results looks right or wrong, right? So I think that's the different, is shifting in requirement and expectation at the moment.
Awesome. And then looking at your own career, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice at the very start, maybe landing in Australia for the first time, you hadn't seen it before, what would it be?
I think leverage more on people who are more successful than you, instead of just put your head down and work every day. Because from the Asian culture, I naturally work very hard, and I do very, very long hours. And I think as long as you do long enough and well enough, you'll be recognized. But I don't think that's a given in this society anymore. So, but I still got here, and I consider myself very lucky because even though I was doing that, people still recognize my contribution. But there could be there could be chances that someone did that and didn't get recognized, and then they just spend a lot of time for nothing. But I think if I could go back, and I would just tell myself stop working that hard and but try to sort of seek some advice from people who are very successful, and then maybe I would not redo my career again. I think it's perfect as is. It's just something I would tell myself, like focus on yourself and well-being wise as well, and because it's very important to keep healthy and eat well and exercise and everything. That's right, for a lawyer.
And I think success leaves clues in so many ways, particularly when you're starting out. Even for a junior lawyer now, looking around, thinking to myself, this is all overwhelming. You're reading the headlines, you're on deals, thinking, when am I going to be needed? But I believe that the next 5 years, the playing field has never been so level.
Yeah.
If you're willing to put yourself out there, try new things, experiment, because we're all doing it. There's no one out there that's an expert in this. And I think having that mindset to be like, right, well, if something is working really well for one lawyer or at one firm, well, how are they doing that? And how can we replicate that in terms of making it our own? I think people who do that and think differently and want to look at people who are successful, they're the ones that are going to get ahead. So I think that's really, really good advice.
That's right.
What's exciting you right now in your practice, in the market, or just life in general?
What's exciting me right now? I mentioned that was the shifting from a traditional way of servicing client, i.e., we lawyers clock in, bill the client the hourly rate and produce something that's like, for example, I spend 10 hours or bill 10 hours. This is the traditional model at the moment, but we're looking at a new model with the help of AI tools and other tools that are available to us to shift to a value-driven model, in my view. So, for example, I'll ask clients, how much do you think my work product worth? And the client says 50K. I say, okay, I charge you 50K, but I'll deliver you the quality product that's worth 50K. But the client doesn't need to see how we get it. Maybe we get it in 1 hour, maybe like 2 hours, or maybe like 50 hours. I think that would shape the future landscape of legal services, especially in the transactional space. The litigation, the disputes is a little bit hard to do that at the moment, but I think for our practice, my practice, I'm very excited to trial that. And then now I already told my team and say, if you can make anything more efficient, you'll be rewarded of that. It's there's a shift being in place, and then the most important thing is, and then people who are doing it actually incentivized to do that, right? Like if you still have the utilization numbers and hours, right, as your performance review KPI, it's not going to work. You have to be like how much profit you're generating. If you actually deliver a 50K work in 1 hour or 5 hours, then your profit margin would be like say 60%. Then you'll be rewarded with that. So I think there's shift now how to do that. It needs support from the firm, from my colleagues, from I think the partners at Baker is already aware of that, and we discussed that in our meetings as well. So that shift at the moment is something I'm focusing on. I'm quite excited about. And another thing is from a work perspective, I think the capital markets in the world is being more fluid, and companies like in Australia, they have opportunities to go to a lot of markets, as you mentioned. Hong Kong is one of them, and potentially in the future when the situation is a bit eased, and the US capital markets, not just Australia capital markets. I think that's something I want to explore in the future as well. Yeah,
it's so forward thinking. It's so exciting. Honestly, I think there's so much doom and gloom in the world in terms of what's going to happen to lawyers, but with that mindset, and as long as you put adding value to the forefront of everything you do,
Yeah.
you're going to be successful.
That's right.
Some quick fire questions. One book you'd recommend to every lawyer?
I actually would like to recommend a book that I don't think anyone here would have read. It's actually it's actually a series of little books. I got it when I was on my business trip in Hong Kong. It's called How to Live. It's by a Zen master, Vietnamese Zen master. His name is Kit Nyan Han. So he is one of the most prominent Zen masters actually telling people in relation to mindfulness. I think for lawyers, we are laser focused on our work and how to deliver value. You mentioned we work very hard. We study very hard when we're young, and we work very hard, and we even weekends and nights we actually focusing on that. But I just feel like lawyers, not many lawyers actually are very mindful of their own well-beings. So the How to Live series includes like how to love, how to smile, how to walk, how to relax, how to focus. So they're all very small stories talking about, you have a step back when you're walking. You don't think about anything else. Don't think about your work. Don't think about your family and the problem you have at work. You just focus on your walking itself. And I think it's very refreshing. I read the series of the books on the plane where I can't reach my phone. Now you can, but I chose not to. So you can't really do anything but just to have a read of the books. I think it's a very awakening experience. And after all, we're all human beings, right? So we're young and we're getting older, and we eventually, we will finish our life. But whether that process is something that you are aware you're doing, like you're doing exactly what you want yourself to do, is something I think all the lawyers, not just the lawyers, I think people around me, I would suggest them to have a think about. I think there was some meditation practice is really difficult for lawyers because we simply don't have time. But I think in the books they talk about walking meditation. So you on the street, you can just meditate at the same time when you're walking, focusing on your walk. So it's very interesting experience. And then
efficiency. Walking and most memorable deal you've ever worked on. What made it stand out?
Oh, well, I think we touched a few of them already. Each deal that I mentioned are quite memorable to me, and it's not about the size and or like how prominent the deal is. It's really the experience of overcoming this painful experience together. So for example, the IPOs I mentioned, we had to work during the weekend, and we actually have a partner. I'm not gonna name his name. Or we have a partner. He's the best dressed partner in Baker McKenzie Australia, and it was the first time when we having the call during the weekend. First time I see him wearing t-shirt, and we had a laugh, and we actually enjoyed the process very much. And the thing is and during the time when we have to get people to sign restructuring document, and people actually the next morning, I think 8 a.m. we'll have to get those ready, but we only have the documents ready like at night time. So someone had to rock up at someone's door at 1:30 a.m. to get their signature. It's those type of small experiences quite interesting to us, and I would say that I might not want to experience again, but it's quite memorable. Yeah.
It says a lot about, again, the firm of the size of Baker McKenzie, but those small things are what stand out. How collegiate you guys are.
Yeah.
Best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Stop working so hard. Actually, I received that last year. I was the highest performing, my utilization is highest in the whole firm. Basically, I worked, I think over 2,000 hours over the years. Not that much as compared to some US firms. I heard 3,600.
Wow.
But I think we have 1,600 as full utilization. So I did work very hard, especially, during nighttime and weekends and everything. And one of the senior partner told me, say, now you're a partner, you shouldn't like, pour your time at working. You should go out and, do BD and mentor the team and, delegate the work. So it's actually helped a lot because my husband was much happier. And he was like, oh, you're actually available during weekends and you're actually at your kids' sports event. So I think it's, to all the lawyers out there, I think this is one of the most demanding jobs, but you can also try to balance it, especially in Australia. People, I think the nice thing about working in Australia is there's no expectation for you to just sacrifice family time, especially for relatively senior or partner level as well. When you have kids, most of them, people quite understanding in terms of your family commitment, and it's always okay. So sounds counterintuitive in terms of don't stop working so hard, but I think it's probably one of the best one I have received recently.
The simplest is always the best, right?
Yeah.
One thing people will be surprised to know about you.
One thing people would be surprised to know about me. I think I already mentioned the living in Las Vegas bit. I was actually thinking about staying in the States and just grow my firm in Las Vegas, and I enjoyed having my lunch and dinner in casinos and having those snow crabs every day. But I don't really enjoy the life on the strip. That is, it's kind of like same thing every day as well. It's kind of like a mirage. But that experience is quite unique because I haven't really met anyone. But actually, I do have some experience, like, visiting the Nevada, Supreme Court in Las Vegas for some like criminal cases at the time when I was living there. So it's quite fun.
It's awesome. I can safely say you are most people I know spend 4 days in Vegas max. You spending 9 months in Vegas, you're the only person I know that have done that. So that's definitely something that I was surprised to hear about you. So that was it. Boom. That was a really, really good podcast. I think a lot of people get a lot of information. How should people reach out to you if they do have any questions?
My email is always available. You Google me. I'm on Google. LinkedIn. And, I'm pretty open in terms of how people reach out to me. I usually love talking to people with this different experience. I don't really need you to become my client. I like to make friends. So anyone who's interested or with a similar sort of career path or want to reach out. I do actually have people originally from China reaching out to me, in relation to how I actually get here. So happy to share anytime. Yeah.
Awesome. Great.